Hey there, I'm Molly, and I'm here to teach you how to make a one-part plaster mold for wax casting. Let me show you the materials you're gonna need. You're gonna need glasses, safety glasses or goggles. Keep your eyes safe from the dust from the plaster. Mask as well. This is also for the plaster. A ventilator works very well. This is the mask you want. Or if you're doing something smaller scale, which is what you'll see today, I think this type of mask would do the trick. If you want to protect your hands, you can also wear rubber gloves. You're going to be using plastilina. This is an oil-based clay. It will never dry out. Super flexible, and it holds its form very well. And you're going to need a baseboard. This is what you're going to put your modeling clay onto so that you can freely work around it. To sculpt your clay, I have a selection of tools here. You do not necessarily need any of these tools. However, they help with lines and details in the clay. A lot of the form, overall form, will come from your fingers. You're going to want to use some oil. I use orange oil. You can use vegetable oil, canola oil, coconut oil. You'll want to spritz a little bit on there and then smooth it over with your fingers. And then you can always go back to the tools. I'll show you this later. Or you could also use a rag. You're going to need a measuring cup, a glass measuring cup, 2 quartz plastic cups. These are for mixing the water and the plaster together for your mold. Plaster of Paris, $9.99 from Ace Hardware. Popsicle sticks, the wide kind. Those are your stirring sticks. Little cups for scooping the plaster. They're paper cups. That way you can easily dispose of them. I use Vaseline or petroleum jelly. This is for my release agent. So I'll be using this a couple times throughout this process. Paper towels. Gotta clean up your mess. And a paintbrush to help apply the Vaseline. Wax, this is beeswax, this is what we're gonna be using to cast. And because I'm not in my kitchen, I am in my studio, I have a countertop burner and a pot with a lid that's non-stick. Super helpful, easy to clean. Let's see. One more thing, I forgot. You're gonna need this plastic container to make your mold. Ta-da! Okay, so now we're gonna start by sculpting our model out of the plasticine clay. It might be a little hard off the block because the block hasn't been, well, this has been in my hand, so it's nice and warm. And the warmer it gets, the easier it is to mold. But you'll wanna pull a chunk off of your plasticine brick and then just knead it back and forth. And then what I'm gonna do is roll it into a ball. And I'm going to gently place it in the center of my baseboard. And then I'm gonna press it down. I'm gonna start forming it with my fingers into the form that I want it to be. And I've decided that I'm going to make a fist. And it's going to be the Black Lives Matter fist. Power to the people. I can simply make a fist with my non-dominant hand and think about how to arrange that. And I could print off a picture. When making this fist, it's important that there are no undercuts, which means I don't want to dig right here and have this like huge relief in this big space. for the plaster mold to sit into, because all the plaster is going to go on top of this. And then we're going to break the mold when we end up pulling this model out. It's not going to work. I picked up the image of the Black Lives Matter fist on my phone, and I'm just working from that to help me like with my lines, with the overall outline of the form. So plasticine is a great material to use. It's oil-based, it never dries out, and it stays together really well. Like you'll notice with this material, like you don't have a lot of crumbs. Like it all stays together. So in order to really remove it or to lose the material, you have to carve it out and pull it off. It's pretty great. So as I start smoothing the surface out, my hands are sticky, so I can't smooth it out with my fingers the way they are, so I need to add some oil. I like to use orange oil. I have multiple purposes or uses for it. So that's what I keep in the studio, so that's what I'm using here. I put a little bit too much on there, and if you find that, I'm gonna try to spread it out a bit, but you don't want it to be over oiled, so that's too much. That was a really good squirt that time. Normally that squirt bottle doesn't work that well. But I'm using the soft side of this tool. Almost there. All right. Now I've got this little area on top that looks a little goofy. It's overly saturated with my oil. So I'm gonna find another tool that will get into that area and keep it like nice, to kind of soften it down. Let's see, I have got, this is a good one. I like these two tools because the back, they look like little spoons on one side, and on the other side, they're nice and curved. This little one is gonna fit into that area real well for me. Okay, now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna prepare this for the mold because we have to put it inside the plastic container and then pour the mold on top. I'm gonna take my palette knife and I'm going to gently lift it off of the baseboard. I'm going to grab my plastic 1 1/4 quart plastic container and I'm going to set this right in the middle. I'm going to gently push it on all sides. I don't need to push it too much. It's going to stay in one place. It's not going to move when I pour the mixture in there. Voila. It's going to stay right in the center. That way it has a perimeter so that the plaster mold can be nice and strong. So now what I'm going to do, show you how to make a plaster mold. So what we're going to do next, guys, we are going to make the plaster mold. So let me grab all of the materials for that and I'll meet you right back here. Alrighty-o. So now what we're going to do, we are going to make our plaster mold. And the first thing I need to do is put on all my safety gear. So I've cleaned my hands. I prefer to wear gloves. I think it's good to wear gloves because plaster is not the best material. Some people don't want to get their hands all dirty, but put my gloves on. I'm going to use the small face mask because I'm not using with using a large amount of plaster. So I think this will do the job well, I guess. I'm also going to cover my eyes up because I wear contacts, and when I get dust in my eyes, I get eye infections, and it's just like a mess. So this is my gear. I'm ready to go. So I'm going to grab one of the quarts. I'm going to start measuring out about 4 cups of plaster because I know this is a pretty deep model in here. My clay model is pretty thick. So I'm going to go aim for maybe at least 2 cups of this plaster. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right. Now what I'm going to do, I could use my water cup, my glass measuring cup, or I could use, if I have 2 of these quartz cups, I could just use this because it has the exact same measurements as the cup that I just measured all of the plaster into. So for ease, I'm just going to use the other quart cup. So I'm going to measure it to just below the 8-ounce mark right here. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I've got my water and my stirring stick, and I'm going to mix this all together. Now, after the water and the plaster is thoroughly mixed, I have 20 to 30 minutes before the plaster starts to set. So, which is great, because if for some reason I did not measure this out correctly and I need more plaster, that gives me plenty of time to do another little mixture and get it and pour it into my mold and have it all join together, bond together. Now, before I pour it in, I need to make sure that I cover the entire inside of this plastic container with my model in the center with Vaseline, because that's my release agent. So I'm going to cover the entire plastic container with my sponge, and then I'm going to grab my paintbrush and go back and cover my model with the paintbrush. Because the model, my clay model, has a lot of detail that the sponge would miss. Now let's see if this covers the entire thing. Oh, all right. So I'm gonna need to do a little bit more because when you cover your model with plaster, you want there to be at least, I would say, 3/4 of an inch between the top of your model and then the top of the plaster. So I'm gonna do 1, 2, I'll do like a little 1/2 of 3. That should be enough. Now, if I had a whisk, that might be good. If I had a fork, that might be good. Nah. I tend to do it just with the popsicle sticks or craft sticks. It depends on what you use them for, huh? I mean, all right. I think this might be good to go. Oh yeah, that's looking much more smooth, except for that little curdled piece of milk. The more you blend the plaster and smooth it out, the better your mold will be. Ooh. All right, so now what we need to do, what I like to do, especially with this plastic container, because there's so much room, there are bubbles floating to the top of the surface. Just gonna give it a few little knocks, try to get all those bubbles out, because we don't want those bubbles to show up in our final casting. And then what we need to do is wait. We need to wait 24 hours for this to harden. Now, well, for it to cure correctly, we need to wait 30 minutes for it to start hardening, but it'll be completely hard and cured in 24 hours. Wunderbar. Okay, so we just made a plaster mold. Now we need to wait. Tomorrow we will come back and we will demold the clay model from the plaster mold. We will then melt beeswax and cast it into the plaster mold, and then we'll have our final wax casting. See you in a bit. So now what I'm gonna do, we have let our plaster mold sit for 24 hours and it is rock hard. And that means I'm ready to pull my clay model out from inside so that we can move on to the casting process next. Now, luckily, I lathered everything on the inside of this plastic container with Vaseline before pulling the plaster mold in. So that means it should come out like butter. And I can already tell it's going to. Wunderbar. Now, I'm going to pick out my favorite, this is probably one of my favorite tools, favorite shaped sculpting tool. It's got the little scoop with the rounded edge on top and a nice softened point, narrow edge on the other side. I'm gonna use the scoop to help me start peeling back the clay from the entire edge. And then once I do that, I'm gonna pull in the center and try to just pull it out, rock it out. But I don't want to, what I don't wanna do is like dig out a piece of clay and dig out a piece of clay and dig out a piece of clay, because that's like, there's no way, A, I have the patience for that, B, I'm gonna be able to get all the clay out if I do one piece at a time. So I want this, my goal is to get this piece of clay out of here in one piece. So first, what I'm gonna do actually, I'm gonna use, my palette knife. I'm just gonna like shave off the excess plaster that kind of spilled over on top of my clay model. And I'm doing this because I don't like wasting clay. So I'm gonna reuse this clay for another project because it's modeling clay and it's oil-based and it never dries out, and I can definitely use it again. Yeah, oh, yes. So there it is, you guys. Power to the people. All right, now I've got my mold. So what I'm gonna do next, now we're gonna get ready for the casting process. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna set my new plaster mold aside, and I'm gonna start preparing the wax to be cast. And in order to prepare it, I need to melt it. So that's where the countertop burner comes in and the pot with a lid. I would like to stress how important safety is when working with wax. When you're working with the wax and you're heating it up, you have to have your eyes or be right next to the wax the entire time because, well, first of all, the wax will melt quickly. Secondly, if you look away for one moment and because the wax is melting so quickly, it could go up in flames in a heartbeat. So you need to turn this on to the lowest setting. We'll put the wax inside the pot onto the burner and then wait for it to melt. When I'm working with the wax, especially with liquefied wax. I want to make sure that I am wearing closed-toe shoes and full pants. Putting it on the lowest setting. I'm going to go ahead and pull this off. While the wax is melting, I'm going to apply the release agent, the Vaseline, all over the mold so that it's ready for the wax to be cast into it. Hey Victor, could you grab me that Vaseline out of the trash? The sponge for the top. And now I'm going to apply the Vaseline with the paintbrush inside. I'm waiting for this to heat up. All right. Because the burner has my full attention, I might turn up the heat just a smidge. Okay, so right now we're melting beeswax on the stovetop. I turned it up a little bit higher than the lowest setting just because I finished putting my release agent into the plaster mold, so I have my full attention on here, so I'm not gonna let anything bad happen. This is fully melted. I'm gonna turn off my burner. I'm gonna unplug it as well. Take all the safety precautions there. I'm gonna go ahead and pour my wax into my mold to avoid drippage. There we go. All right. So now, since we've got that poured in there, what we gotta do is wait. We need to wait for the beeswax to cool and harden. Now, when we come back, after we let this wax casting harden, we'll cool first, and then it needs at least 3 hours to cool completely. I would say 24 hours to harden securely. And after 24 hours, we'll pull it out and it will pop right out like a zit. So, like a big white head zit. So, I'll see you back here when we get this wax casting out of the mold. Thanks. We cast the wax into our plaster mold. We waited for 2 to 3 hours until the wax is cooled, and now we're going to pull it out. Now what I'm going to do is loosen the wax casting from the walls of the plaster mold with the sharp edge. And I can also do this just by kind of like pushing it back and forth, see if it gives a little like rocking, because there was a little bit of shrinkage when the wax cooled. So wiggle it maybe like a loose tooth. There it is. Okay. All right, here we go. Hashtag BLM. Black Lives Matter. Now, what I'm gonna do, what I can do, your choice if you do this or not, but I'm gonna clean it up and make it nice and smooth. And then that way I can maybe give it to a friend, keep it for my own liking at home as a finished object, but I wanna redefine the lettering on here. But thank you guys for joining me today. I had a lot of fun filming this with my friends, Justin and Victor, for Space for Art TV. I hope you guys join me next time for a 2-part mold where we can do some in the round casting of really delicious objects. See you next time. Bye.